Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Brown Bag Bets, your daily quick dose of picks and handicapping, powered by BetSperts. I'm Alex. Joining me, as always, from the Great White North. You can see he's sitting out there in the snow. He must be really warm. I guess it's spending his whole life up there. He doesn't have to wear a jacket outside. How are you, Andy? How are things in Minnesota?
I'm solid. Just kind of still coming down from the high that was last night, and we'll get into that here in a few. But yeah, it's shorter intro today. We don't need to tell you what it is unless you're new. If you are new, it's a sports betting show and it's short. It's going to be like 20, 25 minutes every day at this time, live on YouTube. If you are on YouTube, do the thumbs up thing. Again, one of these days I'm going to figure out what that actually does analytically, but apparently it's good. And yeah, thanks for all the feedback yesterday. We got some nice DMs. We had some feedback. Thanks for any retweets, likes, shares, all that jazz. And hopefully we can keep some stuff rolling. The college basketball totals, I've never lost one now. So I don't have any totals for today, but it's still going to continue to work on that. I'm undefeated on that.
Well, it's nice to get a win to start. Unfortunately, Lamar Jackson scored the second touchdown, so that didn't go so well. But overall, it was a pretty crazy night. I think, as a lot of people know by now, the Cleveland Browns did not cover the 3. They did not cover the 3.5. Pretty crazy ending there with all the laterals into the safety. I mean, what did you think of that ending, Andy? In terms of crazy endings that we've seen, my mind goes back to the defensive score in I think it was Washington and someone else a couple of years ago. You think about some of the Hail Mary plays. You think even the Super Bowl, again, the Tyree helmet catch, in terms of crazy football endings, I mean, does that take the cake?
Yeah, it was nice to not be involved in that. I know plenty of people were, whether you got bailed out by betting a bad number late with a -3, or God forsake it, even a 3.5, or the people that had +3 and they're like, oh, well, I got a nasty push, whatever. It was wild. And truthfully, on the halftime scope, Drew and I picked out the over. We kind of liked the under. We thought the total was going to come in at like 26 or something, and it came at 23.5. We ended up sitting on the over. Obviously, if you watched the game, you saw there was a couple of missed extra points, and we were DMing back and forth like, man, are we going to get screwed by missed kicks again after the Minnesota debacle? And then obviously both teams went over 23.5 by themselves in the second half. I thought maybe it even went to over. It was going to go to overtime at some point. I was actually kind of cheering against Tucker to make the kick, as dirty as that is. I kind of wanted a little more fun. It was fun. It was a really fun game. It was a great game. I mean, shout out to just Twitter and social media in general. Like, the quality of the poop jokes was it was up here. It was just 2 solid hours of poop jokes. It was a lot of fun. So, and they still continue today. So yeah,
to take that right into the bad break tweets, the bad bet or bad loss tweets was pretty fantastic. It was a great night on the field as well as in the social medias.
Yeah, tons of fun. Unless you had +3.5, you grabbed a nice number on that, then you deserve better. But every time, it's funny. Somebody brought up earlier in the day when Tucker had that extra point blocked, and said, "Well, how many of those has he missed?" And I actually hit an under on his very first missed extra point, I believe it was, ever.
Yeah, I remember the story.
He was kicking the extra point to tie the game, which in overtime, it would have gone over with that point anyway. I won it by the hook. And that's one of those things where I always say that every time you have one of those wins where it's somebody else's bad beat, you should write it down in like a dream journal, man. So when you end up on the wrong side of one of these, you can go back and look at it and be like, all right, because it's hard to remember those. Everybody remembers the bad beats. So, but getting into what we do, it's basketball season still. I put out a few plays today. Getting right into it, back to sides for me. And I know I'm a big dog better, but there still was a favorite that popped right away for me today. It was Florida Atlantic. This was a super kind of a weird one looking at it. Again, I haven't bet college basketball this early in the season a ton. And when I started digging into this, it got weirder and weirder as I went. We have a team they're playing Stetson tonight. It is at 7 Eastern, 6 Central. Stetson has played a bunch of good teams. Like, they've played Florida, Miami, Florida, South Florida. Even South Florida is an AAC team. Those are way above their league as far as being a team called Stetson, the Hatters. So you can look at that one way and say, wow, they got beat up by a bunch of really good teams, and that's the thing. But they did open their season with a loss to a D2 school. And anybody who uses Ken Palm knows that he just fills those games in playing D2 schools as 100% wins. So dropping one of those is a really bad look. And the same can be said about Florida Atlantic. Florida Atlantic has played 3 D2 schools, beat the ever living tar out of them, but they've also not done a lot for travel here. This is an away game for them. I bet it at 3. I think this is fine out to 5. It's starting to move. That is kind of the key. If you do want these right away, when I put them in, the moment I bet these, I'm putting them in on the BetSperts app so you can get alerts there, because Florida Atlantic -3 was available an hour ago. The best you're going to find right now is 4. Again, I still think that's fine. I make this closer to 5.5, 6. And yeah, it's a school that's going to be at the bottom of the Conference USA, but they're still going to shoot the 3-ball nice yet. In fact, their best 3-point shooter from last year hasn't even really picked it up yet. He's 5 for 25 this season. He shot close to 40 last year. They got a transfer in from Minnesota. They're filling in decently. Again, still not going to be competing in their conference, but this is a game they should win even on the road here. So it's one of 3 I locked in. And if you want to see the other ones are just disgusting, ugly dogs, like, double-digit dogs on the road that I bet. Check those out. I put those in on the app this morning as well.
Yeah, you can find Andy on the BetSperts app. He's just Andy, folks, so it's nice and simple, easy to find. I like that you mentioned there you were able to get -3. I'm seeing 4.5. You said there's some 4s around. Again, what's your kind of cut line there? Would you lay 4? Would you lay 4.5? Or where are you drawing the stopping point?
Yeah, like I said, I make it like 5.5, and a little heavier than that. So I'd bet a 4.5 if you got a decent price.
Okay, so we'll take it out to 4.5 if you got a good price there. Hopefully you've got a 4, or we're smart enough to already follow Andy again on the BetSperts app, so you can find him at Andy, so you get all his stuff right away. You can even set notifications, which is always really fantastic. Now, any other thoughts there on your college basketball pick or anything else for the people before I jump into my daily NBA future?
No, give it to me every day. You're going to just continue to pad your portfolio of preseason bets. You're going to have so many of these. It'll be interesting to see once we get to the season exactly how many units you have laid down. You'll have to let us know. We are 1 week from the NBA today. So yeah, lay it on us. One more preseason NBA bet.
That's right, folks. You've got a week now until the start of the season. As Andy mentioned, there's going to be one of these every single day till the season starts. If you've been following me, there's already a bunch. I may or may not have to go back and reevaluate my bankroll and unit system based on how many units, hypothetically, I already have down, but we'll get to that at another time. Today, I want to talk to you about the Hornets of Charlotte, a team that I think a lot of people are excited about because they were able to add LaMelo Ball. You look at their starting 5, Devontae Graham, Terry Rozier, Gordon Hayward, again, someone people were really excited about, PJ Washington, Cody Zeller, and again, haven't even mentioned LaMelo Ball yet. Looks like he might start the season on the bench. I could not be less excited for this group of players. I see very little shooting on the floor. I see some real defensive constraints. I struggle to understand why you would give Gordon Hayward that huge contract. He's a nice player. Physically, he is not even close to where he was a long time ago. And what you're doing is bringing another ball handler into a team that already has 2 guys in LaMelo Ball and Terry Rozier that want the ball in their hand. Those guys need the ball. They want it. And if Gordon Hayward has it, there's going to be a lot of trouble in the locker room, in my opinion, a lot of discord. I think what you're looking at is a situation that is ripe for trouble. I mean, is LaMelo going to be happy starting on the bench? And if he does start, is Rozier going to be happy to go to the bench? I see a lot of problems there from a locker room perspective. Again, from a basketball perspective, I don't even know if there is a good 3-point shooter on this team. There's going to be very little space on the floor for this team to operate night in, night out. So from a basketball perspective, again, I couldn't feel worse about the Charlotte Hornets. Now, when I take a step back and look at the season they had last year, their win percentage was 35. When you take a look at their Pythagorean, again, a formula designed to balance out the points they scored versus the points scored against them to give you maybe more of a true idea of what their percentage should have been. It was as low as 29%. As I start to look in some of the markets here, I see win totals of 27.5 down to as low as 26.5, which is effectively implying a win percentage of, anywhere between 36% and 38%. I think that this team is an absolute lock to go under that number. I think there's a chance they have a win percentage under 30%. If you go back historically and look through the standings, there's about 3 to 5 teams every year that have a win percentage worse than 30. And I think Charlotte has a great chance to be one of those teams. So to be able to grab under 27.5 wins, or again, if you have a chance to grab a win percentage market, I believe that the number out there is under 36.5%. I like both of those plays. Again, I expect the team to struggle. I think there's going to be some locker room strife as those guards figure out not only who's going to play, but who's going to have the ball, the lack of shooting, just a lot of factors, I think, working against Charlotte this year. So happy to line up on the under there.
Yeah, and it's like a sad reality. But if you start adding these up, I'm assuming it's just like, I don't bet a ton of these. I do get a little bit into the NFL market, and you find this everywhere. There's 256 NFL games. So there's 256 wins. And this year, there'll be less than that. We've already had a tie. A tie is the same as a loss in the regular season win market total. Obviously, you don't have those in the NBA. But if you take and add up all the wins totals in the NFL markets, it's never going to be 256. It's always higher. I'm assuming it's heavily skewed to the over that way in the NBA as well.
Yeah, I'm looking right now to see if I can add it up quickly. The tough part is we don't have a win total for every team just yet. But I would suspect that's the same. I mean, quickly here, just looking 488 wins in the East, 518 there. Yeah, it looks to me like it is probably a little bit too high.
But yeah, it's something I run into every year where you see someone like they just want to play. And to be fair, I played 2 overs this year. It just I felt like they were off. But you see time and time again people with the unders. It's kind of going to be the sharper bets as it is. I know our guy Plus EV Analytics. He's an actuary, man. He's a math guy. So he's every year he's doing this sort of stuff with alt unders because there's things that happen and you want to take full advantage of that. I don't know if that's something that's available in the NBA, but when a quarterback gets hurt or a team really, really underperforms, and let's say the regular season win total is like 7.5, usually if something bad happens, like a quarterback is injured, it's not going to be, oh, they won 7 games and you won their regular season. It's like, no, they went 3-13. Like you want to take full advantage of that with a big plus money number like that. And that's a super good way to do it. I'm going to have to look if we have something like that in the NBA with some of the ones you guys are getting me. But
yeah, I haven't seen any alt totals yet. But to circle back, I was able to add it up. So looking at Bet Online with 2 teams missing, they had 1,006 wins. There should be 1,080 wins. So that looking at the 2 teams that are missing, Houston and Brooklyn, I mean, they should have 2 solid numbers. My guess is once those are posted, there'll be 4 or 5 games over the total number of wins. So a great point by you.
So, all right. Well, more NBA as we are 1 week away. Tuesday, next week, we're firing away. Special guest time. First guest. Wanted to make it easy on me, so I picked a guy I knew who had a good camera, a good connection, knows what the hell he's doing, and I know the guy personally. So bringing him in.
This is awkward for me.
Drew, I don't know how we're going to do this. Should we do this? Should we make him big? I don't know.
Oh, man, look at you in the winter.
Yeah, let's
Winter
just do
Wonderland.
He picked a white shirt and everything. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's like bluish. I know. I feel like Jack Frost up in this. But Drew, you obviously get into the NBA heavily. It's something you've bet year in, year out. I know I talk to you all the time. You wrote yourself a piece that's not up yet, but it will be up eventually here at VSiN. You've done a little writing. You've got all your prep work, all the groundwork for the NBA season in regular season win totals. How many do you, I'm giving Alex a hard time. How many did you place this year?
I threw 10. I bet 5 overs and 5 unders. Tried to make it a little balanced. You don't want to. I mean, even though in general, again, as everyone probably knows, they've probably heard us say this ad nauseum. But in general, shoot for unders, right? Because they line them so that there's more wins than there are possible, and they know that in general, people who are fans of given teams are just going to go bet the over anyway. So they put a little bit extra tax on the overs across all teams. And unsurprisingly, as I run my numbers, I see more unders pop every time. But it's still fair to kind of try to balance things out. So I played 5 overs and 5 unders as we head into this NBA season. And yeah, curious what you guys thought. Did you have a chance to read the piece? Did you have any specific teams you wanted to cover off the top?
Well,
Alex is what he wants to argue with you.
I was going to say there was one that we disagreed with, and I know we talked about this a little bit in chats the other day. Let me see. We can bring that banner up there. The Charlotte Hornets. Now, I'm sorry. No, that's incorrect. Is that no? Is that? I can't. I'm sorry. You're actually arguing about the Oklahoma City Thunder. I'm sorry about that. So Oklahoma City Thunder. Sorry for that little mix up there, Drew. It looked like you were taking the over there. Let me just double check. You've got over 23 and a half wins, and I couldn't feel better about the under there. Took the under myself a few days ago. When I take a look at this team, again, they sold just about everything that they could have. Basically, you've got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Al Horford, Diallo, Dort, and Bazley. I mean, that's one of the worst NBA starting lineups we've seen in a long time. It's pretty rough. They've got a new coach coming in, and you know what the attitude of the team is. I mean, Presti is selling anything and everything that's not nailed down. My guess is if Bazley comes out or Dort comes out or even Horford comes out and has a nice first couple months of the year, he's gone for the first draft pick that calls on the telephone. I think this team is just going to be a mess. So, I mean, why are you so optimistic?
Okay, that's an interesting conversation to be had about the Oklahoma City Thunder, probably the toughest handicap on the board. And what's funny is that I have them as the lowest rated team in the Western Conference. But I have them getting more than 22 and 23 and a half wins. And it's largely because, as currently rostered, they are one of the better defensive teams in the league. In fact, I have them as high a defensive rating as the Clippers. Dort is an enormous positive defensively. I have a plus on Horford as a defender. Realistically, that this is a squad that I think is going to be able to play lockdown defense. And there's not a lot of other teams in the NBA that I would say that about. On top of the fundamental points of is this roster going to exist for the full season? I think there are two signals that suggest that it will. One is Presti's actions last year. He came out before the season started last year, and there was a lot of speculation. The same kind of couple weeks before the season started. How long is Chris Paul going to be in the Thunder? They're going to move him to the Lakers. They're going to cut him at some point, right? They're just going to sever ties there. And nope. They said it before the season. No, our intention is to try to win. We're not going to tank. We're not going tank mode here. We are going to play Chris Paul and see if we can compete for the playoffs. And lo and behold, they got the 5 seed in the West last year. And, I think Presti in, similar spirit this year is going to play it out with the roster he's got. And who in the NBA is really interested in making deals with Presti anymore? The rest of the GMs across the league have given him so many assets that it's kind of, they're kind of building a monster there in terms of future potential, super team, and just on the basis of assets. So I think number one, Presti probably has an intention to play out as is, and number two, I don't know that there's going to be a lot of teams that are trying to make deals with Oklahoma City Thunder because they've got a war chest that is not the top in the NBA in terms of what they have going forward. And I mean, what else can they really do to accumulate assets? At some point, they're going to have too many picks to actually put on a roster. So
they're the Dolphins, except you don't have 53 spots anymore. It is a lot different in the NBA. And I guess when we were looking over your regular season win totals, I had a bunch of questions. We don't have time for all of them, but my main one is I get to thinking, and we talk about this all the time because I'm more of a novice with the NBA than anything. Like, as we started spinning through some of these teams, I got to thinking about just the news I've seen in the NBA from basically October on was turnover at coaching. And I went and looked. It looks like 8 new coaches this year. And, a big part of setting your numbers to say you haven't seen any of these teams play yet, really. We've had a little preseason, I guess. I shouldn't say that. But when you put a number together, does that scare you off a team? How are you treating that? Some of these coaches have coached as a head coach previously with other teams, so you kind of get a feel for what they are. Like, how are you treating that? Does it scare you off some of these bets completely where you're just like, I'm not sure how this guy meshes with this roster? I don't know if you can talk to that quick before we get a play from here.
As much as I have an enormous amount of I put an enormous amount of importance on coaching for the NFL. I virtually ignore it for the NBA. I figure it's built into the numbers. how the coach is coming up. That there's very little flexibility in terms of roster, in terms of how you are going to distribute minutes that is meaningful, and you have to kind of watch the games play out to identify certain strengths and weaknesses in coaches. Guys like Scotty Brooks could never figure out the right way to rotate Durant and Westbrook, for instance, and that might present in-game betting opportunities if you can identify specific coaching strengths, weaknesses, tendencies, etc. But I would say that in general, stepping back and looking across the, as far as a preseason expectation, you're not really incorporating much. That said, I think the Raptors are a good bet to the over this year because Nick Nurse is going to win games that otherwise they shouldn't. And he's such a good game planner. He's such a good, strategist in terms of coming up with the right matchup defensively to really shut down certain teams that even though they've lost a couple, they lose Ibaka, they lose Gasol. Those are important defensive pieces, but they have a nice backfill coming in terms of some of their wings. And it's going to be as good as ever for the Raptors this year, as far as I can tell you. And they've depressed their win total to 42.5. That's fewer than Philadelphia. That's fewer than Miami. I don't see those teams especially far apart at all. I think that all of these teams are kind of right there in the mixed mid-40s wins. And I think Nick Nurse probably gets you a couple of free wins with his game plan this year. So Raptors are a fair play to the over, and a lot of that is because of coaching.
Yeah,
He gave us a bonus play even with the Raptors there.
And actually, if I can sneak in a question there real quick, you mentioned that
Sure.
Ibaka and Gasol stepping out is a negative. I actually like Baines coming into filling that spot. I mean, do you still have that as a net negative?
I have pretty high defensive ratings for both of those guys, and let me see what I have on Baines. Baines I have more as an offensive player, if memory serves me, but I got to pull up my number here. Baines, I have contributing. Oh, no, actually, I do have him as a defensive contributor. He's a small minus on offense and a nice positive on defense. So, yeah, that actually should be a nice fit.
That's kind of what I was
actually,
thinking.
yeah, the Raptors, I mentioned, before I had a high.
Raptors over.
Yes, I like it. I mentioned I had a good defensive rating on the Oklahoma City Thunder, and I actually have a higher rating. And I failed to mention the Raptors are kind of in that conversation as well. I have a high rating on them. Defense.
Yeah, love that Raptors over. Already on that myself. I think that's a great look. Everything you lined up, I see no reason they're going to be worse. They still have Nick Nurse. They're going to have a full season of Anunoby, which I think is something people are maybe underestimating a little bit. And like we just talked about, I think people are upset about losing Ibaka and Gasol. I think that they're really going to like Baines. He's going to be a nice fit in there. So I'm on board with that as well.
Yeah. Any worry about how they're going to play in their new home in the Tampa Bay Raptors?
I wonder in a year where there's not going to be much home court advantage at all, if it becomes like this rallying presence. I think it depends on the team. I think that some organizations would fall apart in the face of that adversity, like maybe somebody like Cleveland or something. Like we have a bunch of younger guys or older guys that are kind of spoiled. But a team like the Raptors that's coherent, they're already used to a little adversity, having to go across the border basically every time they play. I think that team, again, with the good coach, they'll be fine. I'm not too worried about that. And I think that maybe the market's over-evaluating that in the number.
They don't have to spend the winter in Toronto. Like that's I think it's a positive.
It's a great point.
I always wondered, though,
before we run out here.
Was there any home field advantage, though, built into Toronto as a city? I mean, they have great strip clubs, right?
If you ever watch Joel Embiid play and then watch him play in Toronto, there is a home court advantage in Toronto akin to the one that exists in Miami.
Oh, what? Oh, does Tampa have good strip clubs? I think they do, don't they?
I've listened to some Motley Crue, and it is mentioned in the song. So
it's mentioned in the song.
It is mentioned in the song.
That's all we need.
Before we grabbed you on here, I asked you to pick out one of your favorites or one you wanted to talk out. So we're getting towards the end here. If you want to close us out with one more season win total play.
Yeah. So this one is the biggest misfit I had across all numbers, and I've tried to approach this every different way. Player level modeling, team level modeling, growth projections of the young players. I can't get anywhere close to this number, and I don't know what I'm missing. The Atlanta Hawks at 36.5 wins makes no sense to me. This team graded out as a 16-win team last year in the 60-something games they played. That would have prorated to like 22 in a 72-game season. What in the world did they do in the offseason to warrant an upgrade from a 22-win team to a 36-win team? That is effectively hitting 500 and knocking on the door of the playoffs. I see them as a clear class below the rest of the true contenders in the Eastern Conference. In fact, the Eastern Conference is stratified like I've never seen before. You have a very clear playoff teams and a very clear bottom. And in fact, 6 of the worst 7 teams in the entire NBA are all in the Eastern Conference for me. And the Hawks are one of them. I think this team stinks. And Trae Young is not my guy. I don't think bringing in a guy like Bogdanovic is going to make all that much of a difference. Danilo Gallinari, these Euro guys just got paid. They're really going to come and transform this team. And if you think about what was going on with the Hawks last year, they struggled defensively. None of these acquisitions really make a big adjustment defensively. Rajon Rondo, he's all of a sudden going to be a huge contributor? I don't think so. This is a real head scratcher to me, why the market loves this team. What do you make the number for the Hawks, Alex?
I lean under here. This is one of the teams that every time I look at it, I come up with a different number. I start to look at the roster. Some of the pieces I like. I mean, you have to like Trae Young. I mean, he's an offense unto himself. Bogdanovic is only going to make that easier, having another shooter on the floor. DeAndre Hunter is a nice piece to put next to Young because he can cover up defensively a little. If John Collins can really commit to honestly playing center, I think what you might have is a team where I think Collins might be solid enough on defense and you have enough shooting on the floor where there's a version of this where it looks almost like a Don Nelson team where they're just trying to score 160 points every night. And they don't care. You can score 150 because we're going to score 160. It really comes down to Lloyd Pierce, and he hasn't coached enough in the league, and I frankly don't know enough about him to say too many nice things. He did an okay job. I mean, but he's got this team. They've really gone all in on Young and the speed and the shooting. I'm curious to see. I mean, Collins asked for a ton of money. Usually players don't last after they ask for a ton of money and don't get it. So we'll see what he does for the year. If he moves them on, I think the angle here for me is just honestly to look at overs every night. And if they do move Collins and somehow Gallinari gets into the starting lineup, holy crap. I mean, you could have a total that's like 300, 310. And I wouldn't even blink.
Defense is so bad. They're the worst defensive team I have.
When you described Oklahoma City to me, it's like, oh, that's a team I don't want to watch play as a fan. And on the other hand, this sounds like something I would want to watch. So, but
it'd be great if you could take the teams and put them together. Let Oklahoma City play defense. Let Atlanta play offense. You do a hockey swap.
Oklahoma City, I have the Oklahoma City offense. I have as the worst unit in the NBA. But their defense is amazing, and that's going to be a dead nut under team for me for the first month of the season. I don't think they can make those totals low enough.
See how long it takes the market to adjust something like that. So, all right, Drew, thanks for being the first guest, popping the guest cherry, coming on, talking some NBA. We might have to do this more because there's a lot of NBA. It's going to happen for the next 8 months. Especially if there's any Corona stuff and they have to push stuff back. So a lot of NBA talk. Appreciate you coming on. Really love your insight. Check out the deep dive. I would watch that. Drew's great on there. Halftime your VSiN stuff. Anything else you want to hit on before you go?
Yeah. Congratulations to everyone who bet the election and bet it correctly because they were all graded this morning. So I don't know if you guys had a chance to check while you were on the air, but even Bookmaker finally got on board and graded their bets.
It's all worried about another grading this morning, so I didn't have a chance to check.
All right, well, and Loaf there in the chat, I am going to read that article you sent. I'm going to go back and find that. And again, thanks for everyone else who watched, rate, review, subscribe, like, share. Thanks. DM, hit us with some comments. Let us know what you're betting.
Click the thumbs up button.
And click the thumbs up button, and we'll catch you tomorrow.